Hello everyone, I'm Melanie Masserant, Jove's Library Relations Manager. Thank you for joining us in today's session, Jove's Librarian Innovation Webinar Series. You'll hear from this year's North American winners. They will discuss their seamless solutions that help users access library resources by initiating eLibrary portals, events, training sessions, and more. Today we'll focus on the journey to building an eLibrary portal in a large R&D organization. We'll take a look at what it takes to bring a centralized resource hub to life, identify primary digital resources for research, and better support for library users in challenging times. Now, before we proceed, I'd like to get a few housekeeping items out of the way. Can everyone please use the raise hand icon on their toolbox to let us know you can hear me. Excellent, thank you. Now, if you would like to ask our speaker any questions, please submit them in the Q&A section of your toolbox. We will answer as many questions as we have time during the end of our session. You will get a recording of this webinar in your email in the next 24 hours. At the conclusion of this session, there will be a brief 5-question survey. We appreciate your feedback so we can continue to improve our webinars. Okay, it's time to begin. Let me introduce today's panelists. I have Gabi Tanis, the Associate Director, Organizational Excellence at Janssen Research and Development, LLC. We have Phyllis Minucci, Library Portfolio Support Manager at Copyright Clearance Center, who is on assignment to Janssen. And we have Nicholas Collison, the Director of Library and E-Content at Couranto. Thank you for joining us. All right, let's begin with Gabi, the team lead on this project, who really wanted to improve accessibility and awareness of library resources to the 12,000 staff across Janssen R&D. Hello, Gabi. Thanks for this award-winning entry and for joining us today. I'll let you begin and explain the scope of the project.
Thank you very much for the kind introduction, Melanie. Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, maybe good evening to those of you joining from hopefully many different places around the world. And we're thrilled for the opportunity to be here and tell you a little bit more about the journey that we've been on in developing and ultimately launching the eLibrary portal for Janssen Research and Development. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about the backstory, like how all of this came about. And then eventually my colleagues, Nick and Phyllis, will tell you a little bit more about the development process and then ultimately show you not the actual tool that we use, which we can't share for reasons of sensitivity, but a very similar portal that looks exactly like the one that we use today. So in terms of how this came about, we, as Melanie already mentioned, Janssen Research and Development, which is really, if you're not familiar, just the name for the pharmaceutical companies of Johnson & Johnson, has close to 14,000 staff now. And Phyllis and I, being the library services team for Janssen, found ourselves in a position where we had a wonderful content management system that was in place and that was being used. But we also found that oftentimes when we would talk to our colleagues, the scientists and researchers that we work with on a daily basis, people were not really aware of the fact that a library even existed. And so we would often hear things like, there's a library? Wow, I didn't even know. Tell me more about that. Or if they were aware that we had a library, oftentimes they would just know about a specific resource that they were using. As I'm sure you can imagine, a clinical researcher has a need for much different information, access to information than somebody who works in the lab does. And so maybe they were aware of a particular publication, resource, or database that we subscribe to, but not the breadth of library services. In addition to that, as you probably can imagine, it's rather difficult to communicate with 14,000 people, because as I'm sure many of you are in a similar situation, we all suffer from email overload. And so there's many gatekeepers within Janssen, communications professionals and others who sort of make it a little bit difficult for us. And we can't just send out emails to everyone who already uses or would ultimately use the resources that we subscribe to in one shot. And so we had to really think creatively about how do we communicate with our colleagues, with our users, about the resources that we subscribe to, the content that's available to them, and then other supporting resources such as recordings of trainings that we do with our publishers on a regular basis, like an events calendar, things that are going on. How do we share updates that we get from publishers on almost a daily basis on new tools, new resources, anything along those lines. And then, of course, as library administrators, Phyllis especially, who manages the day-to-day operations of the library, gets questions from users all the time. And many of those are the same questions that seem to come up over and over again. And so another piece that we really wanted to make available was a frequently asked questions library, if you will, with answers to those questions, to also kind of help with the email deluge that we sometimes get with the same questions. And so that was really the background. So we wanted to enhance the presence of library services, showcase more than 40 digital enterprise-wide assets that we had subscribed to, and demonstrate, the value of library services to our community. We had at that point, this was around late 2019 that these conversations started. We had just launched a brand new sort of visual identifier for the library, which kind of started us on this journey of wanting to get an identity out there and have people connect that visual with our library services team. But really what we were going for was a single centralized resource hub as a solution to that challenge that I was describing earlier. So we wanted something that was robust, that would be aesthetically pleasing, like really look fresh, look colorful, and really attract people, right? We've all been on those websites that are kind of drab and boring, and like we spend limited time there, and then it's like, yeah, I don't really want to go back there, and I don't really care about that so much. As well as something that was, of course, easy to navigate, but not overly complex. So it needed to be user friendly. And so, the challenge that we were faced with was, would we try to use some kind of an external platform, such as like a SharePoint site, or some kind of a cloud-based platform, and using internal resources to do this. But as you can imagine, Johnson & Johnson or Janssen Research and Development is a very large organization, right? I mentioned 14,000 scientists and researchers, and it's not often easy to get something going. Like we have lots of governance type things in place, and you put out a request, you don't always know who to talk to. Our IT organization is huge, and so just to kind of figure out who would we work with, what does this look like, and then a lot of our IT work is actually outsourced to other companies, so we knew there would be obviously a cost element involved in that. So we were kind of in that point in terms of we had something in our mind, we knew what we wanted, we sort of had a visualization of what it would look like, but we didn't really know how to move forward. So then, of course, we work with a number of different suppliers and publishers in our day-to-day work in library services. And in one of our regular meetings with Couranto, which is the supplier that negotiates with publishers on our behalf, we just sort of in a side sentence, I think, happened to mention the fact that, we were having this issue and we were really trying to bring increased visibility and awareness to our library services. And we're hoping to build a portal, and that would be one of our major goals and objectives heading into 2020. And at that point, when we met with the Couranto team, Nick and his team sort of listened to, our desire, our concern, and we were brainstorming for a little bit, and they said, wow, well, this is something that we can help you with. No need to kind of go through all your internal channels, like trying to figure that out. Why don't we just partner together? And we said, wow, that's really interesting. Like, tell us more about what that would look like. So at this point, I'm going to hand it over to Nick, who can tell you a little bit more about how we went from there.
Well, it was an interesting time because then COVID really did hit. So time was of the essence. And we literally had weekly meetings to scope out the exact requirements of Janssen R&D, looking at the compliance issues. We had several whiteboarding sessions where we finally came up with a finished product. It then went to our design team. They drew it up. It looked fantastic. We knew that it was going to need some tweaking, and then sent it back to Phyllis and Gabi to say, okay, do you want to work with this? Let's now build the wireframe. And that's exactly what we did. I mean, we thought that we would have some with challenges with IT. I mean, there are two groups of people that scare me in life, the IRS and IT. And surprisingly enough, IT was particularly easy. Now, obviously, we had to do some jostling and poking and prodding. But in my humble opinion, we managed to deliver a product in record time. Normally, this is a 6 to 9 months engagement. And I think we certainly, from the end of 2019, well, I'm going to say from February 2020, we kind of got that delivery right on time. A lot of the work was really on project management. I mean, it was really Gabi and I talking virtually every other day, to make sure that IT were doing their business, that our designers were making sure that it happened. And then obviously working with Phyllis, who is an amazing librarian, to make sure that we actually get the content delivered through a single IP address so that we could all gain access. I was particularly pleased with what we had done, and the product for Janssen is evolving, and there are going to be new asks that are coming up. And I'm just very, very honored to be working with two amazing professionals where in a time of crisis, we managed to deliver a product to over 12,000 associates through to the Janssen community. But that's really from my end. I mean, it was a successful project. We delivered exactly what was required, and Couranto is very, very happy with the end result. So I think I'll hand it to Phyllis now. She's much more interesting. And you're on mute.
And I'm on mute, but no, I'm not. Thank you, Nick. I will say, while we were working on this, we made sure to reach out to some of our scientist colleagues for their input. And so, we would show them a design and they would come back and say, did you think about including this? Or can we tweak this a little bit? So they were very much partners in the development of this. It was a fun project. We're super proud of it. And let me now share my screen and stop my own video, and I will give you a brief tour of the portal. So as Gabi said, this is not the exact JRD eLibrary portal. It's a very close representation of the functionality and the features that were developed in partnership with Couranto. And at the top header, you can see that there's a space for branding, which is where we would have our Janssen logo and our eLibrary logo. And then below that is a welcome message to our users. And the welcome message features icons and text that are color-coded, and they correspond to different sections of the portal. Front and center to our portal is what we call our knowledge resources. And these are jump tiles that link directly to the various journals and platforms and databases, both internal and external, that we make available to our users. It was super important for us to be able to manage and maintain all of the features on the portal ourselves. And Couranto built that functionality into the page for us. It's super easy to add new jump tiles, to edit existing jump tiles, change the order in which they're displayed, update links or descriptions. It's truly just a matter of opening an admin feature called content mode and making the update. We can even capture usage for each tile. So there's a good amount of data coming back to us as well. And you can see when I hover over a tile, a tooltip describing the resource displays, And if there are special situations regarding accessing a particular resource, say there's some IP or authentication issues or an account is required, we can insert a special instructions section as well to give our users a little bit of additional content. On our portal, right underneath the knowledge resources section, but it's not displayed here, is also a way for our users to contact Gabi and I directly if they need assistance, if they have questions or suggestions, or just want to provide us some feedback. Below the knowledge resources section, we offer some additional features to our users. The Did You Know section is where we can announce new platforms or services, any changes to existing platforms, or really any announcements that we want our users to see. The Training and Resource Center is a super useful feature of the portal and probably one that I use in terms of an admin almost all of the time. This is where we announce upcoming trainings, either internal Janssen trainings or library-led trainings, or even external vendor-led trainings. And then following the training, we provide link outs to training materials or recordings for people who weren't able to attend. And then finally, the Ask the eLibrary Experts section is an FAQ, where we've tried to address many of the common questions that our users have. Below that is an event calendar that shows upcoming JRD events and training opportunities. And we can switch from a calendar view to a list view. And then we can include detailed information about the event with registration and calendar invite invitation. And then on the Publisher News and Messaging Center, I'm sure many of you get dozens of useful emails and announcements from publishers every week, but you just don't have a way to pass that on to your users without flooding their inbox. So this is where we can post those announcements and our users can browse at their convenience. Hidden from our users and visible only to Gabi and myself are some features that give us very useful data about how our portal is being used. Aggregate activity shows all of the use in the past 10 days, but we could also just look at use today, the past week, the past 2 weeks, or the past month. The activities stream shows us who's using the portal. And this is important, not so much in who we see using it, but who we don't see. And we take that as an opportunity to reach out to groups to promote library services and identify any unmet needs. And finally, the search turnaways reveal ways in which our users are not finding what they came looking for. All of this data can be exported to an Excel spreadsheet. Below that, also only visible to Gabi and myself, is a heat map, an activity heat map, and also an activity leaderboard, which we love because we can see kind of our power users, our top users, how many times they've logged on, and then we can reach out to them for really valuable feedback about what they think of the portal. If I jump back to the top of the page, over on the left, this is, again, visible to Gabi and myself, but these are the options for editing the content or the design of the page. And we can also jump right out to the standard subscription dashboard on the Couranto side to manage our content. And then on the right is a search bar, which was a suggestion actually from one of our scientists. And we kind of envisioned that that would help direct our users to the resources that they wanted. But in the end, it revealed the need for an almost Google-like search across all of our content. So this prompted us to begin looking at products that would offer semantic enrichment and an aggregated search experience. And that's something that we're in the process of introducing to our clients now. Finally, and again, not visible on this screen, we asked for the ability to flash messages when our users log on, and Couranto went ahead and created that capability as well. And that's super fun to edit and add messages and then watch them pop up on the screen so that our users are always seeing the very latest news coming from library services. And with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. That's the end of my tour.
Yeah, maybe just a thank you very much, Nick and Phyllis. Maybe just a few things to sort of summarize and kind of, you know, point out a couple of specific things. So I just want to, I mean, I think it was clear in the presentation, but I want to just reiterate the fact that this was very much a team, you know, a partnership. This was not just Janssen. This was very much, you know, Phyllis and myself, Phyllis being an employee of Copyright Clearance Center, being on assignment at Janssen. She and myself make up the Janssen Library Services team, working very closely with Nick and his team in making this happen. So this was not just a, you know, one person project, but this is very much a team effort. And as Phyllis mentioned as well, I mean, all along the way, we did get input from our colleagues, from our researchers, other, you know, business colleagues. We would show them, you know, where we were at in the process and say, like, what do you think? You know, is there something missing? Is there something that you would like to see? And that's really all of their input contributed to where we are today. So again, what Phyllis showed, I think it was obvious, was not the actual JRD eLibrary portal, which we cannot share for reasons of sensitivity and confidentiality. Of course, we think you'll understand that, but it looks exactly like that, which of course, you know, much more data behind that. And you know, Nick mentioned it as well. I mean, working with IT can be scary at times, right? But what we found was that the team, and this continues to today, actually, I will say, you know, this was not just a, hey, let's work together for 6 months to develop something, produce it and go live with it. But also what we found, and we're super grateful to that, is that Couranto will come to us with suggestions and say like, hey, how about we give you this capability, or we do this for you. I think it was actually their idea to add those in-product messaging functionality, right? And we just receive that and are so grateful for it. So we continue to evolve. This is not just you know, once and done type product, but we listen to you know, the input from our colleagues, from the researchers, and as well as continuing to work with Couranto on you know, making it better. And I saw somebody put through a question on challenges. I mean, yes, working with IT can be challenging, but I think as Nick pointed out as well, it was really, I think, much easier than we expected. Even though I remember early on, and Nick and Phyllis, you guys will remember this as well. Like, you know, Phyllis and I always had this idea of like, and I think you see it now, a very colorful, user-friendly, you know, something that really kind of attracts people and says like, oh, this looks good, so let me spend a little more time here. And I remember when we first kind of raised this with the team at Couranto and the IT support especially, it was sort of like, oh, we're not sure that we can make it that colorful, you know. But then, you know, we talked through it, and sure enough, we were really able to give it that exciting and fresh look that we were hoping for. So, you know, thumbs up to a great team that I've been very fortunate to work with in leading library services. And yeah, we hope this has been helpful. So Melanie, I'll give it back to you. I'm sure there's more questions that people have, and we're more than happy to you know, tell you more about the project without wanting to bore you, of course, with additional details.
All right. Thanks, Gabi. Okay, let's begin the Q&A portion of today's session. Okay, so let's begin with this. So, you know, it seems like you saw a demand to make all the assets available to all your researchers and put it in a really like robust and simple centralized hub. Can you describe the information retrieval workflow for the JRD library and end users prior to creating this new eLibrary portal? Like, was it very complicated back then compared to now?
Do you want me to take that, Gabi?
Yes, sure, please go ahead.
So we did have a content management system in place, as Gabi mentioned, and most of the robust users of content would work through that content management system. They would maybe do some discovery in PubMed or, you know, in a chemical search or something like that, and then either directly link out to publisher platforms or work through our content management system. But the real challenge came During COVID, suddenly people weren't working on site, and publishers still being a little bit behind the times with IP authentication. We had some real challenges that suddenly people lost access. And so we had put some proxy IPs in place prior to all of this kind of shutting down and everyone working remotely. And thank goodness we did, because between that and then developing the portal and really streamlining the ability for our scientists to go to one spot and be able to get access without hitting paywalls was a big step for us.
Okay, so end users would often hit paywalls and try to access content that you guys weren't subscribing to. So that was probably part of the workflow. But now with this hub, anything that they click is something you guys are already subscribing to, correct?
Sometimes they were hitting paywalls even with subscribed content, depending on where they were coming from. And so they weren't quite sure, I think, how to use all of the tools that we had put in place. And part of it was that we really didn't have an identity. We didn't have one library page where people could go to, or they weren't aware of it. And so this really gave us an identity. It gave us a home. And I think it really did help streamline workflows, because they could just come to one place. Everything is authenticated through this. They weren't hitting paywalls any longer.
Mm-hmm.
And it just made things much less complicated for them.
And they're accessing the resources through, I guess, they have a single sign-on. Is that the one way to manage all these global employees who need to get access to like articles and whatnot?
A lot of it's single sign-on. Some of it is still IP authenticated. But as I said, we have proxy IPs in place that help streamline all of that. So no matter where they're working, whether they're still working remotely or they're working at a J&J site, they're getting access.
Great. Okay, let's move on to our next question. How does this site control access to resources that may not be available to all Janssen employees globally, or perhaps limited by a region?
You want to take that again, Phyllis, or do you want me to?
Happy to do it.
Go ahead.
So this site, Couranto worked with our IT department, and only JRD employees can access this site, and it's working with SAML to kind of identify and credential people coming into the site. So just by virtue of coming to this site, that's how access is being mediated.
Okay. So can you discuss any challenges the team experienced while you were developing this awesome portal?
So we talked about it. Nick, go ahead.
I'm going to honestly say that we didn't really face any challenges. I mean, we were so focused on getting this content and information out to the community that we took a 6 months, a year project, and we condensed it in a very short amount of time. Now, the challenges we thought that were going to be really hard was going to be possibly IT. And that actually turned out to be an absolute pleasure. It was quick, it was fast, and it was efficient. I think that one of the things that we did incredibly well was project manage, the whole development, the exercise, the statement of work. We knew exactly where we wanted to be. Gabi and Phyllis had their vision, and it was just about taking that vision and then turning it into a deliverable product, which they could then take out to their community. I mean, the things that we thought that could be issues would be getting access. That was, and as Phyllis alluded to, that was actually dealt with a year before. So thankful for that. Mm-hmm. So really, from the access point, getting the content out to the associates across Janssen R&D, worldwide, it wasn't an issue. There was I personally don't feel that there were any challenges whatsoever, except for making sure that we kept people on track. And I think that, we were fairly aggressive with keeping people in line with deliverables and making sure that the end product was delivered in the timely fashion that we needed. But Gabi, I don't know, Phyllis, I don't I didn't see any unforeseen challenges from the whole concept to the delivery. I personally felt that it went really, really well.
Yeah, I would agree in that I don't think we hit any major challenges or roadblocks, right? I mean, there's always little challenges along the way, as there are with any project, but we work through them. And to your point, Nick, I think the project management was critical. And I would say one thing that's really critical in a project like this is keeping the communication channels open. I think the fact that we had weekly meetings was critical to the success, because on a weekly basis, like, sometimes if it's been a few weeks since you've talked about something, people forget, other priorities take over, things don't get addressed in a timely fashion. But because we met weekly, we had a standing meeting on the calendar every week, and we knew what we had talked about the week before, and we would say, we agreed on, doing this or making it look this way or whatever. Where are we with this? Are we hitting any roadblocks? If we need to pivot, how do we do it or whatever? So keeping those communication channels open between all of us, I think, was really important. And then I think one challenge that I'll point out, and it wasn't really so much related to development of the portal, but it was just the fact that we were doing all of this during a pandemic, right? It was like after COVID struck. And so this is not completely related, again, to the portal development, but maybe to our library services offerings in general. In that we really had to think about, are there other resources that we want to make available to our colleagues, to the researchers and the scientists who are working so hard to advance science on our behalf, and especially, of course, Janssen working on the COVID vaccine. Are there other resources that we need to make available to them? And so, for example, Jove is one of those resources that we brought on board during that time, knowing that people wanted, they were working remotely, and was a critical resource for us to add during that time, and is now plays a prominent role in that knowledge resources section that Phyllis showed to you. So I just wanted to make sure I pointed that out as well, as an associated challenge, if you will.
I do want to add one thing. I mean, the real success behind this whole project was the true collaboration. And I know that we keep on saying that, but Gabi, Phyllis, and we've worked together for many years now. And for me personally, having an open and transparent conversation, looking at what the need and requirement is, that's paramount. And I think really the way that the three of us work together, and then with our respective companies, this is really what delivered the product in the end. So I thought I'd throw that out there.
Agreed.
I think the other thing that really helped was that we didn't wait and release it all at once. We released it in stages and continued to refine it once we had that backbone set, and just kept adding features and adding features and adding features, which is something we're still doing today.
Okay, I'm going to move on to the next question. What features from previous internally developed Global Information Center websites at J&J did you learn from?
So many, really. I mean, like I said earlier, we've all been on those websites that, that are not user-friendly, that don't look good. And it doesn't matter sometimes how great the functionality is. If it doesn't look good and it's not attractive, I think people just won't use it. And so, we had all been, I think any of us probably on this call have all been to so many different sites. And I think, you learn from everything that you see. And so I think, yeah, again, coming back to the graphics, and I know I already talked about that. That was a big one, wanting the site to look appealing, having a search function that actually works. And, that was an interesting one for us. As Phyllis mentioned, it's like, we thought we would give our users a search function that would enable them to search through the content on the portal, just that page that we were showing you. Yet what we very quickly found out is that people were trying to search through the library, if you will, through all the licensed content that we have, the databases and whatnot. And so, that's something that we're working on now and making that available to our users. But there's so many different things. And again, I think I mentioned some of them in my intro as well, in terms of like just giving information into people's hands versus waiting for them to come to us to ask, like that frequently asked question section, for example, is really big. And actually, I would venture to say that we have gotten fewer questions because of that, because people can just go there and find the answers there. So it's really planning. This is something we haven't talked about yet, but planning this effort, I think, was critical, and not just getting started and saying, hey, let's put something together, but really thinking through, like, what is it that our researchers really need? Let's make it easy, as few clicks as possible. And right there on the front page, that's kind of why we gave that the prominent location of the knowledge resources right at the top, because most people that come to the eLibrary, they want to go to a particular, either to a content management system, to a database, to look at a journal, another public, whatever have you. Making that, thinking through, like, what do we want to have that sort of most prominent spot, and again, making it easy for people to find the content that they need. So Phyllis or Nick, I don't know if you want to add anything to that in terms of what we learned from other sites.
I think one of the things I can't remember, I think it may have been Phyllis, but I remember when we were putting the tiles together with the publishers and, the various vendors, and then we took a step back and thought, okay, we're going to be dealing with thousands of researchers who may not know who publisher X, Y, or Z is. And I can't remember who suggested it, but we said, well, what about putting a description, putting a bubble above the tile? Because we were thinking more about the user experience and what they would then get out of it. And I thought that was such a smart little idea. But I just wanted to add in that because, again, that came out of the weekly meetings, the discussions, and then, this new idea would come up, and then we would take it back to Couranto developers, and they would go, right, okay, let's do it, and which they did.
I think also just always being in dialogue with our users, right? And advocating for our users. And we wanted them to use these resources, this vast investment that we've made. And so if there are any impediments to using, right, there's kind of like a psychology to information use and consumption. And so we wanted to remove any barriers. We wanted to remove impediments. We wanted it to be attractive and easy to navigate. And so it was really conversations with our users, knowing what wasn't working for them in the past, that kind of helped us develop this along the way.
So while you guys were kind of doing the usability testing, you at different phases reached out to different user groups to get feedback to incorporate. So it's not as if you just rolled out one finished product and said, here it is, have at it. We went in steps, and you found that going in steps and doing user testing is probably what made the hub a success.
For sure.
Yeah, it was a big part of it, no question. Yeah.
All right.
I think the other thing, Gabi and Phyllis, you did some amazing road shows, all virtual across your groups, and I think that really added value to the success.
Yeah, that's one thing that we really haven't covered on to this point, right? So this was pretty much about the time that we went live with the portal, which was October of last year, so almost a year ago now. We embarked on, a number of roadshows that continue to this day, really, and we have many more groups that we want to, go and do this with, because as you can imagine, it takes time to talk to close to 14,000, I think, is what we're up to now in JRD to talk to our users. But again, going back to that, one of the first comments that I made in this webinar, which was that, our users keep saying, oh, we didn't even know JRD had a library, or, maybe they just know of a particular resource or two, but not really, they don't have an understanding of the full breadth and depth of the library. So we have a short deck that we take. And, just because we went live with the portal and maybe had, a couple of announcements on our company intranet, it doesn't necessarily mean that everybody sees that, right? And so, as I'm sure many of you who are in the communications business know, you have to communicate. I think they say something up to 7 times for it to stick. So we're just trying to go about it different ways. You know, we have plasma screens at our various sites where we announce this, and yeah, the roadshows have been critical. So we do, you know, we use a number of slides to kind of talk about the library. What is library services? What does it consist of? What are the resources that are available? And then Phyllis actually gives a demo as part of that roadshow in terms of how to use the library portal and some of our resources. And what we found is that they've been very well received, and people typically have, you know, they come with questions and say, like, you know, can you tell us more about this, or how do we use this, or how do we go about that? So that's really kind of created that two-way engagement that we were looking for, because we can put out as many tools and you know, portals and everything that we need, but what we want is the engagement with our clients to make sure that we're meeting their needs. And so the roadshows definitely were, I think, a big part of the rollout and the change management of it all, if you will, to make sure that, you know, that this is something that sticks and is used going forward.
These roadshows, is it a mix of like virtual and in person, or are you guys back to doing these in person? And how did you promote these roadshows? Or did you just have a liaison in different departments, you know, to get this going and to get users to come to you?
So far, everything has been virtual, and that's, you know, merely by the fact that we are still sort of in a pandemic, right? And while some people have returned to the office, a large majority of folks are still working remotely and virtually. And so we have done only virtual to date. That doesn't mean that we wouldn't be happy to do in person at some point, but also, you know, given the fact that JRD is a global company, many teams, even if everybody were in the office, many teams consist of people that sit in 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 different countries. And so we'll never be able to have everyone together in a room, even if Phyllis and I were to go to a particular site and do it there. You know, we'd always have people joining in virtually. In terms of how do we go about it? So it was a little bit of a mix. So we had, you know, I've been at JRD for 18 years. And so, you know, between Phyllis and myself, we know quite a few people. So we had specific people that we could reach out to and say, hey, we've launched a new portal. We'd like to tell you more about it. We'd like to kind of do a refresh on library services to your group. We think it'd be really helpful. So that was one thing. And then, of course, as they started, there was a little bit of word of mouth as well. Like somebody would be in one of the roadshow sessions and would say, hey, I think this would be really helpful to another team that I'm part of over here. would you be able to come and do the same presentation for them? You know, and then it sort of develops from there. So it's a little bit of a mix of planning and then just responding to people who say, like, hey, we want to learn more about library services and or a specific tool. So Phyllis, anything to add from you? Because this has clearly been a partnership between the two of us on that front.
Sometimes it's as simple as a new employee joining JRD and wanting a little orientation of their own. And then, as Gabi said, it's like, oh my gosh, you need to do this for our entire department. So I think the biggest one we did, Gabi, had, I don't know, several hundred people. You know, and that was kind of, I think that was one of our big kickoffs. But sometimes it's just a dozen people, you know, or half a dozen people. It really doesn't matter. The most important thing is that they're taking full advantage of the content that we're bringing them.
All right, thank you. All right, we have another question coming through. Okay, regarding usage of subscriptions, can this site identify what budget centers are using resources relative to having departments pay for subscriptions?
Indirectly only. So based on the sort of the administrator only section that Phyllis showed you at the bottom of the site, where Phyllis and I can retrieve sort of and see who's using the site and whatnot, we are able to download that data into Excel. And then we have a little sort of an internal tool within Excel that we can use to then run a larger report based on our enterprise directory, and then look at, you know, cost centers and whatnot that are associated with the users coming to the site, and then sort of build reports there. We always have access. We also have access to that data different ways, though. We have business intelligence data that we rely on that gives us much more in-depth information on usage of our publications. denials and other things, as I'm sure many of you in the library space do as well. So the site can do it to a limited extent, I would say, but yeah, we get more in-depth analytics through different channels.
So since we're on the topic of usage analytics, so now that you have this centralized hub, I'm assuming usage has increased. Can you talk about the metrics you're using? Now, did you create your own dashboards to run stats, or are you relying on published statistics to get the full picture?
Do you want to take that one, Phyllis?
Yeah, sure. So as Gabi said, we have a couple of tools. We do have publisher counter data that we monitor. We have some other internal business intelligence tools that we kind of look at in relation to the counter data that we're getting. We have some analytics that are coming off of this dashboard. So it's a kind of a 3 or 4 pronged data approach when we're looking at the usage.
Okay, thanks for answering that. We still have more questions coming through. Okay, so I have someone here asking, when a resource is complex, how do you find a bubble effective to communicate the scope and value of the resource? And the person asking this question has said, we have found our bubbles don't always grab the scale across various scientific users.
It can be a challenge. I think that's why we kind of rely on our publishers and our vendors, and their marketing departments are always very happy to help us promote resources. We send personalized emails when we can. As in any large organization, there are gatekeepers to departments so that employees aren't being swamped by one email message after another. It's a challenge. I'll agree with you. It's something that we are continuing to work on all of the time.
Have you guys ever used a publisher banner ads? I know some publishers they offer that as an option to help promote, awareness of resources.
I mean, we use a lot of in-product messaging with some of our publishers, especially the databases, to help promote. When we can identify users for particular resources, we reach out to them directly. But yeah, it's a challenge. In a large organization, it's a big challenge.
But that's also what that section on the portal, I forget what it's called now, like what's new, publisher resources, those types of things, where if it's something specific that we feel like really raises to, the level of us needing to make everyone aware, we will highlight it there, and say like, did you know such and such resource now does such and such, or, whatever it might be. So we have additional ways of highlighting some of the resources, but we do, to a certain extent, I think we do rely on, also colleagues telling each other and say like, hey, have you checked out this resource? I was able to do X, Y, and Z. And that's, sometimes we get that as well in the roadshows where people start to talk to each other rather than just asking us questions. So that's also a really valuable, I think, aspect of the roadshows and sort of initiating that peer-to-peer conversation about resources as well.
So it's having, this kind of the same message, but put through different channels, because you said for a message or outreach to resonate, a user needs to see it like 7 or 8 times.
Yeah,
exactly. So let's talk about the selection process. So when you guys were curating the eLibrary, I'm sure the selection process was, quite time consuming. What steps did you go through in evaluating what belongs in the hub?
Because we have good metrics, because we have good analytics on our journal usage and spend, we know what the most heavily used resources are. So we were able to make sure that they were included on the portal. And then as suggestions would come in, we would add new resources. So it's still an ongoing process, but we're able to identify what the most heavily used resources are.
Now, in terms of getting approval for this project, who are the internal stakeholders that helped champion this initiative? Were there any particular departments that really provided full support? I know for something to be successful like this, you'd really need some like, internal champions to back you up.
Yeah, definitely. And we had those. I mean, first and foremost, I would say our sort of functional management that we report up into, right? That can help us get the word out. So they were very supportive. And in fact, I think that's where the idea or the request initially even came from. Like, I don't want to claim credit for something that wasn't originally my idea, So it was certainly, I think, management also kind of having this vision and knowing that something needed to be done. And so when I took over in this role of overseeing library services, I kind of, came in already with knowing that we had to do this. But yeah, no, our functional management, I would say first and foremost, and then really groups across R&D that we were partnering with. They maybe weren't necessarily aware of it from the get-go, but as we were working through the process and we kind of asked them to give us their support and give us their input, I mean, we didn't hit anybody who was like, yeah, you guys shouldn't be doing this. Everybody was like, wow, I'm so glad this is finally coming together, and anything you need from us, just let us know. I mean, I think people just saw the value right from the beginning, and were very much, happy to provide resources or provide support wherever we needed. So we were very fortunate in that way.
So it wasn't like you guys came up with this idea and pitched it before developing it. Internally, the demand was already there, and that you guys started creating this and in project planning before the pandemic, and then as the pandemic happened, it kind of put you guys on the fast track to finish it. So
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
right. And here's a question for Nick. How many library portals has Couranto created? I'm assuming you work with a mix of different industries, but in the library sector, are you working with a lot of libraries?
Yes, I mean we do. We work. Actually, we work with both procurement, information professionals across multiple different market segments. I think that if we looked at the actual creation of the various different portals that we have created across many different areas, I mean, again, we're working with information professionals to procurement people, and it's really just getting that content out there to those associates. Not that I'm going to plug this because I don't work in our sales department, but we also have a back-end system called Clarity, which manages the whole, buy to execute on the content side. And, that's originally what we're contracted to do with JRD and J&J companies. Is really the purchasing of the content. The whole discovery hub for us is a product that we developed a few years ago, and it's grown and grown and grown. I think that I'm going to do a plug now, but the beauty of Couranto is that, we actually care about what our clients need, and we tend to take a step back. We listen, we look at the requirements, we offer advice, we give guidance, and then we go away and create a product for that particular industry or client. But we do work in multiple sectors, but our main areas are professional services and pharmaceutical. That's primarily what I deal with. So I hope that answered the question.
Thank you. And we have time for one more. Oh, another question's popping in. Okay. All right. Can you talk a little bit about how you've created and aggregated research experience within the website?
So we're not quite there yet. It is something we're working on implementing at this point. As I said, we just kind of identified the need based on the data that we were seeing on the website in terms of how people were using the search area. So that's something we're working on implementing. Not completely live yet with that, so that would need to wait for a future webinar or some kind of other follow-up. But we're not quite there yet to kind of spill all the beans, if you will, but we're working on that, and we'll be going live with that soon.
All right, thank you. And before we conclude this session, do we have any more questions? Looks like we're done with our questions, and we could wrap this session up. So I want to, again, a special thank you to our panelists for talking about the scope of this project and answering everyone's questions. So thanks again, guys. And just a reminder, the recording of this session will be available via email in 24 hours. Thanks for joining us, everyone, and have a great day.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Take care. Bye.